Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today we are covering Chapter 23! Well, I'll admit, I didn't see some of this coming. Very interesting chapter. We get a lot more Perrin, which I don't dislike. We get some interesting wolf revelations. Beyond Min's vision, which I think involved a wolf, I don't think I had any expectation or see any other foreshadowing, if it was there, to suggest Perrin having this ability. So I guess he's got a couple levels of barbarian, but I think he took a level of either ranger or druid. Interesting chapter. It starts off with him having this somewhat adversarial relationship with Egwene. It's a relationship that really confuses him, centered around whether or not he's going to ride Bella. So essentially, he doesn't want to ride Bella for a handful of reasons, and Egwene insists that he also ride Bella, that they take turns. So Perrin doesn't want to, in part because of how big he is, so it seems that his size is something that he is very self-conscious about. He's frustrated in that if she's going to expect him to be the leader, why won't she listen? And he's comparing himself throughout this initial journey to other leaders and then thinks, well, the other leaders in these stories never had to deal with Egwene. And I think there's also an element of chivalry at play here in his desire to walk and let her ride the bulk of the way. And Bella gets a little bit of personality as well. Like, she doesn't want to be ridden by Perrin because of his size. Or maybe that's just how Perrin interprets the look. Probably a mix of both. It turns out that first night with the fire, Egwene had used the one power to start that fire. She doesn't actually have any flint or tinder. And this greatly freaks out Perrin and makes her promise not to do that again. Although, let's be honest, I think she's going to break that promise pretty darn quickly. I don't disagree with Perrin. If nothing else, she could accidentally start a massive blaze in a forest. That's not a great idea. That first night of them journeying out, or the first day rather, they do manage to catch a hare. But that's more or less the only meat that they are able to get for a long time. The rest of the journey, they're pretty much looking for mushrooms and tubers and what have you. Queen's crowns were the best that they found. The farther they go, there's nothing. There are no villages, no people. It's very much wilderness. At some point, they do bump into some ruins, but they're too afraid to check out the ruins because of the Shadar Logoth experience. But beyond that, it's pure wilderness. Humans have not even been here before kind of a thing. At a certain point, they smell smoke, a cook fire, somebody roasting dinner, a rabbit. Perrin instructs Egwene to stay behind and hide, which it surprises him that he listens, and he's trying to work out why it is that she listens sometimes but not at others. And Perrin goes and checks out the fire to see who started it, if it's safe, if it's dangerous. And it's a man. Perrin's glad it's not a Trolloc, and the man is very strange. The reader gets the idea he's clearly a hunter of some kind, because he's dressed in all kind of furs, rabbit, squirrel, and so on. Like, all over the place. Pants, hat, shirt, all of it, I think. His trousers appeared to be made from the long-haired hide of a brown and white goat. Gathered at the back of his neck with a cord, his graying brown hair hung to his waist. A thick beard fanned across half his chest, a long knife hung at his belt, almost a sword, and a bow and quiver stood propped against a limb close to hand. So, I got hunter vibes, more or less immediately. His eyes are closed, he's leaning back, he seems asleep to Perrin, though clearly he is not. And the hunter more or less invites them to take a seat and eat. So My immediate impression of this guy is that he's going to be a net good for these two. I don't think he's adversarial or dangerous. Certainly not in the way that Fane was when Rand bumped into him, certainly not in the way the White Cloaks were, and certainly not in the way that Captain Domon was. I think his name was Domon, the ship crewmaster that Rand, Matt, and Tom signed up with, or employed, rather, to get them to Whitebridge. This guy strikes me as more or less good. Dangerous, certainly, but good. Perrin calls out for Egwene, and she comes by, and the strange man, the hunter, introduces himself. It's either Elias or Elias. I'm going to go with Elias. Elias Makera. And at that introduction, we get a very specific and interesting description of the guy, whose eyes were closed before. Perrin gasped and nearly dropped Elias's hand. The man's eyes were yellow, like bright, polished gold. Some memory tickled at the back of Perrin's mind, then fled. All he could think of right then was that all of the Trollocs' eyes he had seen had been almost black. So this is definitely not a Trolloc, I guess. I don't know really what the Trollocs part of that description was pertinent to contrast. I guess it's to contrast, but bright, polished yellow gold eyes seem pretty unique enough as it is, and I at no point thought that this guy was a Trolloc. So it could be some of the wolfish thing going on, but that, I think, was more accomplished by the some memory tickled at the back of Perrin's mind then fled. Maybe I'm being dense here, though, which happens quite frequently, actually. Anyway, Elias sits and patiently allows them to eat without questioning them too hard. He does mention that there isn't a house inside 50 miles, and Elias asks what they're doing out there, and Egwene explains that they're going to Caemlyn, which, yes, they are, and it was their intention to ask for directions anyway. They get into a point later where they tell a rehearsed lie, and I will sing those praises later when we get to it. But for the moment, Elias starts laughing uproariously, awkwardly so, to the point where Perrin wonders if they're eating with a madman. And he explains that they're like heading north of-ish Caemlyn, just walking in the wrong direction. They'd end up at the Spine. They'd end up at the Aiel Waste. It takes an Aielman to find water in the waste, and they don't like strangers much. It's just interesting, which I'm sure will be important later. Egwene asks him to show them the way to Caemlyn, and Elias ominously says that his friends are coming. Bella starts to get really antsy, understandably so when we find out who his friends are, and suddenly a bunch of wolves surround them. And it's a very, very intimidating moment, and Perrin notes that they all have yellow eyes like Elias's. Perrin is prepared to fight, but Elias cautions him not to. They won't attack if he doesn't attack. Bella calms down, but is still very uncomfortable. Bella gets a lot of personality here, which I enjoy. Egwene, of course, jumps to the conclusion that they must be pets, but Elias informs her, "Wolves don't tame, girl, not even as well as men. They're my friends. We keep each other company, hunt together, converse after a fashion, just like any friends. Isn't that right, Dapple?" Aren't dogs descended from wolves, though? That would mean they do tame well. Well, anyway, the wolves all have very cute and interesting names, and he goes on to try to explain why they have the names that they do. And it's sort of a meandering, it's kind of like, it's something that means the way shadows play on a forest pool at a midwinter dawn, with the breeze rippling the surface and the tang of ice when the water touches the tongue, and a hint of, it's a little rambling and not quite right, which I thought was unique and interesting and really grants the wolves a sort of foreign mindset to humans. So I thought that was well executed. Perrin asks how Elias learned to. He explains that they found out, not him, not at first, and that's always the way of it. The wolves find you, not them. And I think a big part of why I, at this point, this far in, I was inclined to trust this guy is, to my recollection, dogs, if not wolves, are adversarial to the Dark One. So, dogs and wolves are not wholly dissimilar. Yeah, again, I'm getting good vibes from him. Elias explains that whatever magic it is that he does have, it's not the true power. In fact, in many ways, it is older than the true power, or the one power. And that he's no friend of the Aes Sedai, who wanted them. The Red Aja, I believe, want him dead. But I'll get into that stuff later, because I think I've jumped the gun a little bit on that one. He does talk a little bit about how wolves remember. It's almost like a hive mind kind of thing, which I don't really know how to feel about. I guess maybe Jordan was going more for a primal instinct type thing, but it read to me as hive mind, and I don't really associate wolves with hive mind. Wolves remember things differently from the way people do. Every wolf remembers the history of all wolves, or at least the shape of it. Like I said, it can't be put into words very well. They remember running down prey side by side with men, but it was so long ago that it's more like the shadow of a shadow than a memory. Yeah, see, it starts off as instinctual, but then, well, anyway. He explains it can't be taught, and then he reveals that Perrin can do it. Surprise! And all of these characters are, I think, going through journeys of self-discovery and having to come to acceptance of these magical parts of themselves. And Nynaeve is doing it. Rand is doing it. Now Perrin will do it. Egwene seems wholly ready to embrace her magic. Then Elias asks them essentially what their history is. And I cannot praise highly enough how smart Egwene and Perrin are, particularly compared to Rand and Matt, who keep just telling anyone and everyone their plans. Egwene goes into a rehearsed story, having come from Saldae, and they just want to see the world. Elias listens to the story, and Dapple tells Elias that the whole thing is a lie, every last word. But seriously, good on Perrin and Egwene for being that smart. Elias does threaten them, tell the truth, or, be attacked, essentially. He wants to know about Trollocs and Halfmen. It's clear that they are involved with them in some way, and one of the wolves, Burn, viscerally dislikes the Dark One because he was, burned by a Trolloc at one point, I believe. And so if these two are associated with the Dark One, he wants them dead. We get the passage, Egwene was looking at him, he realized, waiting for him to decide what they should do. Light suddenly on the leader again. They had decided from the first that they could not risk telling the real story to anyone, but he saw no chance for them to get away, even if he managed to get his axe out before... Dapple growled deep in her throat, and the sound was taken up by the other three around the fire, then by the wolves in the darkness. So, of course, we get the characters that are smart enough to lie in a situation where they have no choice but to tell the truth. At least they tell it to someone reasonably trustworthy. Perrin decides to tell the truth, and he explains it all. More or less, he keeps the story of the dream to himself. I don't know how much of a difference that would have made, but as long as he can get away with it, fine. And this is the point where Elias explains he doesn't like the Aes Sedai. I don't hold with Aes Sedai. The Red Aja, those that like hunting for men who mess with the One Power. They wanted to gentle me once. I told them to their faces they were Black Aja, served the Dark One, I said, and they didn't like that at all. They couldn't catch me, though, once I got into the forest, but they did try. Yes, they did. Come to that, I doubt any Aes Sedai would take kindly to me after that. I had to kill a couple of warders. Bad business, that, killing warders. Don't like it. Perrin responds, this talking to wolves... It has to do with the power? Of course not. Wouldn't have worked on me, gentling, but it made me mad, them wanting to try. This is an old thing, boy. Older than Aes Sedai. Older than anybody using the One Power. Old as humankind. Old as wolves. They don't like that either, Aes Sedai. Old things coming again. I'm not the only one. There are other things, other folk. Makes Aes Sedai nervous, makes them mutter about ancient barriers weakening. Things are breaking apart, they say. They're afraid the Dark One will get loose is what. You'd think I was to blame the way some of them looked at me. Red Aja anyway, but some others too. The Amerlin seat. Ah! I keep clear of them mostly and clear of friends of Aes Sedai as well. You will too if you're smart. There's a lot of interesting lore there. So I guess this is a spoiler alert. I know that there's something like 7 or 10 gates keeping the Dark One locked away. Presumably, they aren't all lasting currently. And I guess it's interesting to me, and I'm guessing that as that's happening, the Dark One, I guess things maybe like time perhaps blends together in some way, maybe. Old powers come back, I would imagine in some small way, in part to help more than hurt, really, unless it's just like a weakening of the universal fabric or whatever. But I do also think it's interesting that this power is older than the One Power, because I got the sense that the One Power is the force of the universe in a way, the wheel of time, the everything. So very interesting stuff to think about. Perrin says he wants to stay away from the Aes Sedai, and Egwene gives him a sharp look, and he hopes that she won't burst out that she wants to be an Aes Sedai, and I guess Egwene isn't that stupid, which I'm glad for. But still, she needs to... She knows... She may not personally hate Aes Sedai, but she knows their reputation. Elias offers to let them stay with him, which is a very generous offer, I think. Genuinely so. I don't know how much of that is because Perrin is like him, or how much of that is the pack understanding the innate goodness of opposing the Dark One, of their quest. There's also a big element of, I don't know that the pack is strong enough to protect them. I presume that the pack is very formidable. He even talks about, talks about how formidable the pack is. They could even take down some Fades, but could they take on an entire army? I don't think the Dark One would spare any expense to get Perrin. So it's a tough one. Perrin throughout all of this is essentially communicating with the wolves, but trying to pretend he's not, or he's more in denial about doing it. So he's not quite yet ready to accept that part of himself, it seems. And in fact, that exchange is, listen, I wish you'd stop saying that. I can't do that. What you're saying. As you wish, boy. Play the goat if you've a mind to. Don't you want to be safe? I'm not deceiving myself. There's nothing to deceive myself about. All we want. We are going to Caemlyn, Egwene spoke up firmly, and then to Tar Valon. And then we get a very funny and well-deserved snap back at her from Perrin. What about you, Perrin? Me? Well, let me think. Yes, I think I'll go on. Well, Egwene, that makes both of us. I guess I'm going with you at that. Good to talk these things out before making a decision, isn't it? A little bit of sarcasm there I did not expect from him, and yeah, I support it. She blushes, but the set of her jaw doesn't lessen. Elias says that the pack has decided to head south with them, otherwise they'll starve to death, at which point Byrne, who is the very aggressive one, gets up and leaves, and is followed by some of the other wolves. Elias explains that Dapple runs the pack, but some of the males could best her if they challenged, but she's smarter than them, and they all know it. She's saved the pack more than once, but Byrne thinks the pack is wasting time with the 3. I read 3 and had a moment of confusion, then I wondered if they were including Bella in that, which it makes kind of sense there, considering he's a wolf, so why wouldn't he? Anyway, Perrin feels Byrne leaving. A dozen other young males loped after him, and he feels a thought from Byrne as sharp and clear as if it were his own thought. Hatred and the taste of blood. And is that for Perrin or for the Dark One? I'm not sure. So yeah, interesting chapter. I know that Perrin's in denial of his newfound power, but it was interesting how capable he is, having just discovered this power about himself. I guess it's an innate thing and not necessarily a thing that needs to be trained at. So, interesting. I think that's all I got for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.